COVID also did facilitate now the very silent way of and manner of processing whatever one will call the findings or the collected views from the public. And whichever way we look at it, COVID-19 played or will play a big role in what is eventually submitted as the report by this committee. And whether we like it or not, yes, the committee may have also gone out of its way and, customized their report to COVID-19, or if they did not, it is my very strongest feeling that at the implementation stage, that customization will have to be done so that it is sensitive to the protocols required.
Allow me to probe you on that particular matter. When you say COVID-19 friendly, what exactly do you mean?
What we are saying is that the earlier intended design of this BBI was we do the kind of mobilization that was happening before, then that would lead us to a referendum for issues that would require referendum before reforms. But when you look at the COVID-19 pandemic, when you see our friends in Burundi went for an election and the reports from there are casualties, high-profile fatalities, it would be very ill-informed for us to go the referendum the way we have conducted referenda before, because that entails mobilization, campaigns, public gatherings, queuing at the polling stations to cast a vote, then, congregating around polling stations to count those votes, celebrating results. That was possible before COVID-19. Where we are now, and that is why I have to caution my compatriots, we cannot do things that manner we did them before COVID-19, which therefore means that where we are going to require a referendum to conduct any constitutional reform, that referendum will have to be done in a different way that observes protocols of COVID-19. And remember, Article 1 of the Constitution gives the power Kenyans have and requires that Kenyans can exercise these powers directly or through delegated authority to their elected leaders. I foresee a situation where this second limb or this second branch of exercising this sovereign authority of Kenyans carrying the day, in which case, do I not think that our leaders will persuade us that in the COVID situation, if we go the referendum the old way, it is going to cause fatalities, infections?
Are you in any way validating, because talks are already simmering, that the two sponsors of the BBI process could be exploring using the parliamentary route to push for these proposals?
Oh, certainly. Oh, certainly. Where we find ourselves, honestly speaking, the direct exercise of the citizens' sovereignty is not viable during this pandemic. Nobody asked for it, but is here with us. And therefore, this is why I say that our top leadership will persuade Kenyans to go the legislative way. And therefore, what we knew as a referendum, what we defined as a referendum in the Constitution may not be what is going to determine the constitutional reforms that we are going to go into.
The last I checked, it was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when we are going to have a referendum. That is, it was firm and it was everywhere, and that was the talk. What happened? Why the sudden about turn? And just take us through that.
No, that was before the COVID-19. Yeah, and that is really the position that and looking at the architecture of the BBI, which is an offshoot of the handshake, and the handshake was between two leaders of the biggest coalition, which commands about 60–70% support of this country, and therefore looking at the two leaders of those leading coalitions, they command the mandate of about 70% of the citizens of this country. Therefore, meaning that when their thoughts and thinking is congruent, then, Kenya has spoken. And that is why it was obvious, and anybody would say, it is not a question of if, it is a question of when, because if the Right Honorable Prime Minister and the President are in concurrence that we need to cause reforms to happen, then 70% of Kenyans have spoken. And therefore, that is why, at that time before COVID, it is a question of when the referendum was going to take place, and people were saying it should be anything not beyond July. Obviously, knowing that we will have finished our budget, and the budget provision for the referendum would have been factored in, and therefore is a question of formality conducting that referendum. But the thinking has since changed because of the COVID-19. We will not go the traditional, conventional referendum way, and that is why I think, and I prophesy, that the two leaders are going to convince their troops, to convince the rest of Kenya that the best way to go is a parliamentary constitutional amendment rather than
before COVID-19, I had an opportunity to host you on quite a number of shows, and you always prophesy, still prophesying post-COVID. Yes. But anyway, that's on a light note. Let's talk about the likely implications of this. You've read the 9-point agenda included in this particular report, the one that we know, not the final, with the one we're expecting. Some touch on key issues that would warrant a referendum that is constitutionally, like a change in the governance structure, like anything that touch on devolution. These are issues that cannot just be changed without a popular initiative. Probably tell us how that is going to play out.
I think that is the elephant in the house, because Article 256 of our Constitution outlines the areas of the Constitution that cannot be touched without a referendum. And I can't agree more that even going forward, there is no way those areas should be touched without a referendum. And these are matters touching on the supremacy of the Constitution, the territory of the Republic of Kenya, the devolved units, meaning the 47 counties, and I'm not saying that Nairobi has already even been subjected to changes, notwithstanding the Article 256. So, I mean, there are those areas that we cannot touch without a referendum.
Yes, and they're included. These are some of the areas that really the 9-point agenda is touching on. So are they going to be dropped?
Oh, no, they will not be dropped. That is why I am saying a referendum will have to be conducted, but in a manner that is customized to our situation now. Because, I mean, look at it. What is a referendum? Because the requirement under Article 256 is that so long as at least 20% of Kenyans participate in a referendum, and as long as at least 50% of the counties participate in a referendum, that is a referendum that qualifies to be called a referendum within the meaning of our Constitution. And therefore, and I said it elsewhere, if the Right Honorable Prime Minister mobilized his counties and the Jubilee leader and head of state mobilized his counties, we will have more than 25 counties which will participate in a referendum, and it is not difficult to get the 20% threshold of public participation of voters within that referendum. And therefore, this is why my thinking is, in the worst case scenario, if we have to go the referendum the traditional way, yeah, then of course that is achievable. But because we are sensitive about the COVID-19, and our leaders are indeed very sensitive, we have done everything to ensure that Kenyans are not unduly exposed to the risks of this coronavirus. It is that basis on which I am thinking that we can achieve what we will describe as a referendum, yeah, by getting it done through delegated authority by the people of Kenya. And perhaps that is the first constitutional amendment that we are going to make, that the constitution we made and the provision for referendum did not foresee such a referendum taking place during a pandemic. And therefore, since we are in a pandemic, and since we must carry out a referendum, or what will be called a referendum, then it behooves everybody to take what it takes to ensure that we put an infrastructure that will answer to the question of having conducted a referendum and therefore achieve the Article 256 requirement of amending those aspects of the Constitution that require a referendum.
Just for the interest of our viewers, some of the issues that ought not to be touched without a referendum are the supremacy of the Constitution, the territory of Kenya, the sovereignty of the people, the national values and principles of governance, the Bill of Rights, the term of office of the President, the independence of the judiciary and commissions and independent offices, and of course the functions of Parliament, the objects, principles and structure of devolved government. These are just some of the issues that cannot be touched unless we go for a referendum. So are those issues in any way in the report that you have interacted with? Because I believe whether you support BBI or you don't, or you do not have an opinion about it, as a citizen of this particular country, you took time to at least go through the report just to know what it offers. So are these issues included in that particular report? That is what we want you to tell us. But then again, as we continue this conversation, let me just take you through the 9-point agenda, Steve, and you help me understand out of these issues, what stands out for you? The Building Bridges initiative centered its content around this 9-point agenda. That is how to deal with the lack of national ethos, also addressing the issues of inclusivity, enhancing devolution. They were also seeking to solve polarized elections, to address issues of safety and security, and how to deal with the beast of corruption in the country, and also explore shared prosperity, and finally responsibility and rights. So these are just what were forming the main agenda for the BBI report. Having interacted with the report, what is it that stood out for you when among these key pointers? And as the committee will be submitting their final document, what do you think they should add in this list, and what should they subtract?
Now, a very great question. The 9-point agenda formed the beacons of what BBI was meant to ask us Kenyans to comment and give suggestions of how to deal with that. And remember, and I'm not surprised, the lack of national ethos was top on the rank. This country had sunk into some sense of indiscipline at all levels that required serious divine intervention to get us back on the rail, because we had sunk into a situation where there is no respect for the presidency, no respect for constitutional offices, no respect for even political formations. And you find, you would see people who get sponsored to be elected on a particular ticket, turn rabid and turn rogue against the very political formation that has licensed him to get elected. So the country had degenerated into a situation of recklessness, which therefore required that one of the very serious issues that BBI should come up with is a formula. How do we recover and, get back our people to feel Kenyan, work Kenyan, talk Kenyan, and have a sense of national esteem as citizens of this republic. If you asked me, if we get that right, then I'm sure the rest of other things shall be added unto us. And I'm not therefore surprised that the kind of crackdown that you saw major political formations start doing, cracking the whip and dealing with the dissenters and telling them, look, once you subscribe to a certain formation and its constitution and regulations, you are bound to work by that. And if not, take a walk. Yeah. So I saw, I think all actors in the Republic say, now this time it is no nonsense, it is this way or the highway. And that is one way of, ensuring that you instill discipline that ultimately, if harnessed, can grow into Kenyahood. We need to be Kenyan.
Now that you brought out that point, and you will continue, responding to my question, but now that you brought out the point about the whipping, cracking the whip and ensuring all members toe the line, what draws the line between, when you have become a rebel of a particular outfit, or you're just expressing your concern and your interest? Are you not allowed to have a voice and a different opinion while still existing within that political outfit?
Yes, you are. And perhaps this is where that crackdown was extremely necessary. Because viewers, when you are within a formation, particularly a formation that has formed government, there is a collective responsibility by all of you who have formed that government. And therefore, it is upon you to ensure that within your backdoor, boardroom negotiations, express all your views, all your dissents, and all your agreements and disagreements.
Explore internal mechanisms.
Yeah. But when you are playing out as government like Jubilee, it is extremely reckless for you to now have a view of your own, because you cannot. Yeah. And that is the kind of indiscipline that I say is what had led to degeneration of order, and therefore had, eroded our national ethos. So that, it really didn't matter that you belong to a certain formation and that formation has taken a position. Once that had happened, every member of that formation is bound. And therefore, that is why I'm like, and it worked at the same time. People were misbehaving within the national ruling party. People were misbehaving within the opposition outfits. People were misbehaving everywhere. And that is why I said, I think all actors had to call order in all their formations. And this order will permeate down the structures of government and political parties, so that we have order. So that if we have a government position, we have a government position, and therefore, the rest of the people are required, if they are in opposition, to also take a position of their own and then prosecute it. Right. That way we have order in the country.
I want us to now, go to the Parliament buildings, and just to follow up on what is happening there. This particular morning, we'll be taking you there in a bit. Currently ongoing is the swearing in of the new members of the Parliamentary Service Commission, and we will be taking you there in a bit. But then again, we are following up on other matters as well. This is actually a different function. We'll be letting you understand more about what is happening across the country. But before we do that, Steve, just tell me a bit about what you feel with regards to talks that a section of political leaders are relating this purge in the leadership of political parties and House committees to what they term as preparation for the task ahead. We just had a conversation about the BBI proposals sort of being pushed through Parliament. What do you think? Could these conversations be carrying any weight?
Oh, yes, they do. Because as the evangelists teach us, you can't put new wine in old wineskins. And truth be told, for these national formations, both in government and the opposition, to prosecute their agenda effectively through the houses of parliament, they have to have disciplined and loyal leadership. And what has happened, therefore, is one step towards bringing order and creating infrastructure for each respective actors to prosecute their case through Parliament. And BBI is one of them. And where, there is concurrence between the ruling party and the leading opposition, NASA, and other actors, that there are certain constitutional reforms that are required to take this country to the next level. Indeed, it was therefore necessary that those who were not loyal and faithful to those proposed amendments, those who were opposed to BBI, have no business, therefore, midwifing the proposed reforms that are going to be taken through the House committees. And for them, we tell them they served their term. Now we are on a new leaf, and indeed, we would want to see the new wine put in new wineskins and not old wineskins because it
at this time that we are talking about building bridges and bringing people together and, you know, just working as one country, having what identifies us as Kenyans, we still see our political leaders engaging in sort of what you'd call disunity. We see what is happening in political parties. We've just talked about the purge, and we also see what is happening in regions like in the Western region, still fighting over unity among themselves. A lot is happening in our political landscape, and when it begins from the top, I believe it has a ripple effect on the people at the bottom. Do you think we'll ever achieve this particular dream, or it will remain a dream for a very long time? And what do we need to do to get there?
Thank you. By the way, national unity does not mean us speaking the same things everywhere, every time. The freedom of thoughts, the freedom of conscience, and freedom of expression are still allowed within and outside political parties. And what we are seeing, like in Western Kenya, is because there are fragmentations of political formation. From there we have ANC, we have Ford Kenya, we have Independence, we have Jubilee. So it is a mambo jumbo that is difficult to, you know, to put together. But all said and done, I have seen initiatives by leadership in Western Kenya trying to explain to their, leadership that, I mean, you need to live for a purpose. You can disagree locally, but you really need to be united nationally. Yeah, but what we see playing is the local disagreements, the local competition that is being brought to the national platform. And this is typical of certain regions. And we say with the time, perhaps they will learn, because that kind of local engagement can be very costly at the national level. Other regions are very well informed that you can have local differences, you can have local competition and disagreements, but this should and can never play at the national platform. And those regions obviously have a sway in the national distribution of resources, in the acquisition of major national positions, and even in tilting votes when it comes to voting this way or that way. So, I mean, all we are saying for Kenyans, there can only be one leader at a time. Yeah, if it is that getting leadership is an end in itself, and if you're not a leader, then nobody should be a leader, then that attitude to leadership is really not productive, both for oneself and for the region anybody pretends to be representing. Because there is a difference between local representation and representation at the national level. Because look at Western Kenya, for instance. Eugene Wamalwa is not elected, but you cannot ignore him, you know, in the national body politic when it comes to Western Kenya. I mean, and you can't take it away from him. And it is only useful for that region to use that is able to access certain national resources, I mean, to achieve it for the region. But
exactly my point. But then we agree that they need to change the how they address their differences.
Exactly.
The how needs to be worked on. So that at least, even if we exist in, democracy is actually thrives on, differences that are solved maturely.
Yes.
And I believe the how is what needs to be worked on. But let's talk about another subject before we go on a very short break. This touches on inclusivity. And just like what you've just mentioned a few minutes ago, the fact that you've used the example of Eugene Wamalwa being where he is, he can be able to use that, space to be able to help even where he comes from. How do we achieve inclusivity? How do we get rid of this Mtuwetu syndrome that I have to have my person at the top, I have to have my person at this particular position for my region or for my community to get a share of the national cake? How do we get to achieve inclusivity without the suspicions around it?
Thank you. Inclusivity, by the way, is a major ingredient in the Constitution, so major that the Constitution even provides for those marginalized communities and persons to be given special recognition whenever we are making any decision in government, whenever we are distributing national resources, and whenever we are making any state appointment. So inclusivity is everything. But the question of how we interpret inclusivity is where the problem is. Is inclusivity of regions or sectors, or is it inclusivity is about individuals? The problem with some of our regions is that that inclusivity means individuals. That if a certain individual is not present when certain things are being done, then that is not inclusivity. And therein is the biggest challenge, and there is where we have had, where you have the example we've just dealt with, the example of Western Kenya. When we have persons from Western Kenya included in government, there are certain people in Western Kenya who don't recognize that and say it is either me or none. And therefore, they undermine the faces that are presented as representative of certain region. It plays everywhere else in this republic, and that is why we say that our country and our countrymen need to mature up and know that this inclusivity is and should be more for regions rather than individuals. And so long as the face that represents a certain region know that they are not there because of their own individual self-aggrandizement, but for the betterment of that region, and they should form a fulcrum around which leaders, even those who have not had an opportunity to be in leadership, should galvanize for them to determine and prosecute the regional agenda for inclusion in the national agenda, and therefore we have each region of this country reached by national resources and impacted positively so that we have integrated development for it to be meaningful for this country we so much love.
All right, we'll continue having this conversation in a bit, but right now we want to follow up on that event that I told you about. We take you to the Parliament buildings. Today there was the swearing in of the public service staff, that the newly appointed Public Service Commission. The event is currently ongoing. Let's just follow in on what is happening right now.
Advertisements were placed in the local newspapers with national circulation. Several people applied. Thereafter, a committee of the commission was appointed to undertake the process of shortlisting qualified candidates. Thereafter, the committee made its recommendations to the full commission, giving the commission those that it deemed qualifying to proceed to the process of interview. But as you know, even after the interviews, the commission makes its recommendations to the two houses of parliament, which then proceed to do their own approval processes. And I'm happy to note that the Honorable Rachel Amolo went through those processes successfully and was approved by both houses, thereby concluding the process as provided for in Article 127, whereby Parliament, meaning the two houses, duly appointed the Honorable Rachel Amolo. And therefore, the Honorable Rachel Ameso, I congratulate you for having gone through those processes and having emerged the most suitable and qualified candidates who met all the requirements. I believe you have what it takes. Many of us are not strangers to you, but this position is occupied by a person who is not a sitting member of parliament. But obviously, to appreciate the fact that the Parliamentary Service Commission is established to take care of the welfare of members and staff of Parliament. And therefore, it is important that the persons that are selected must be people who satisfy, in the eyes of Parliament, the aspect of dealing with the welfare of both members and staff. I welcome the Honorable Rachel Ameso. Once again, congratulations. God bless you.
Now, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Commissioner may make her remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, commissioners who are here. Thank you, the Secretariat that is here. Mine, I'll not say much.
All right, so that is what is currently underway, the swearing in of the Public Service Commission. We saw there the National Assembly Speaker Justin Muturi speaking earlier, and we will be giving you details about how this whole process is going to go throughout the day. Now, we want to continue having a conversation in studio, and in a bit we will also be joined by Mheshimiwa Ayub Savula, the Member of Parliament for Lugari constituency, as we seek to explore what is coming with regards to the BBI initiative. I told you earlier when we were starting this conversation, that yesterday was the expiry of the term of the BBI initiative task force that has been chaired by Senator Yusuf Haji, and they expected in the coming few days to be presenting their final document to the appointing authority, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and later the public can be able to get a chance to also explore and understand what they've been able to come up with. So we've been talking about quite a number of dynamics and what has been shaping this conversation since this process began, and have been having that conversation with political analyst Steve Mogaka. Thank you so much so far for your insights in this conversation. And we were talking about the issue of inclusivity earlier, but then we also want to talk about what has been termed as a hot button. This is the issue of having chaotic elections each and every year. It's one of the things that is also captured in the 9-point agenda for the BBI report. I want to understand, from your perspective, what do you think will be the silver bullet for us to be able to solve the issue of chaotic, elections that we have in each and every electioneering period?
Thank you so much. The biggest challenge we have with electioneering and the competition has all along been around the presidency. And we had earlier in 2010 created a constitution that was designed to water down the presidency so that it is not the life or death of this country. Because so far it always played out that unless your region has or your person has the presidency, then you don't have it. And that is what agitated Kenyans to stop at nothing, to ensure that they are either at the presidency, or if they don't have it, then the country burns out. I'm hoping that as we go to this BBI, we again saw that between 2010 and now, centrality of the presidency and prominence of the presidency has again played out to the extent that now, there is need to rethink whether the 2010 constitution really achieved what Kenyans wanted. And this is what informs the BBI, objective of watering that presidency even more, which is the reason why there are thoughts about introducing a prime minister position, introducing deputy presidents and deputy prime ministers, to water down this so that at least if your region does not get the presidency, at least the region will settle for other positions. But more importantly, the concentration of power and decision-making on national resources in the presidency is a bit watered down and become a little more inclusive than it is now.
Well said, and some still criticize that, saying they're concerned about the implications this will have on the taxpayer, but we'll get to that point later. Allow me bring into this conversation Mheshimiwa Ayub Savula. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us this particular morning. We are talking about the BBI initiative. I just want you to tell me your quick thoughts with regards to what you feel should form the backbone of the final document that is to be presented to the public later. If we are to, even have hope that this process is going to heal what ails the country, what is it that you feel should be included in this particular initiative?
Thank you so much. The main issue of making a constitution is to unify a country and make a country cohesive, irrespective of the many tribes that exist in that country. The issue is they must live in harmony and a cohesive, a constitution that unites a country for the sake of economic and social development. That is the main issue.
All right, well said. We'll be getting back to you to give us more insights about some of the issues that you hope for. But then again, let me take you back to the Parliament buildings right now as we follow up on the ongoing swearing in of the new member of Parliamentary Service Commission. All right, we'll be doing that in the course of this particular broadcast as well. That is one of the activities that we're tracking for you right here on Newscheck. Remember, this morning as well, we're expecting to get an update on the plans to reopen schools. This morning, the Cabinet Secretary, the Ministry of Education, George Magoha, was meeting stakeholders in the education sector that come from NAT, KUPPET, WASU, KEWOTA, and other unions, just for them to be able to discuss the preparations of reopening of learning institutions. Later, we'll also be having a very important conversation about the planned reopening of places of worship right here in studio. I'll be hosting some religious leaders who will be giving us their insights on how this should be done best. But in studio, we're talking about matters that are also of significance to the country. The BBI initiative. I'm hosting Mheshimiwa Ayub Savula and political analyst Steve Mogaka. Thank you so much once again, gentlemen, for creating time. Now, before we went to Parliament, Mheshimiwa, you were telling me about what you think forms the backbone, should form the backbone of this particular process. But then I also want to understand your view with regards to talks that are currently ongoing in the country, that we could just be shifting gears from a referendum and exploring the parliamentary route. Do they carry any weight from where you sit?
It is so difficult to envisage that we can only carry out a constitutional amendment process through Parliament. There are two ways of amending the Constitution. One is through Article 256, that is the parliamentary initiative. Then the other one is Article 257, that is the popular initiative. That is, you must go for a referendum. The issues that we are looking at in the BBI are similar to those issues that were raised at Bomas of Kenya. And those issues that were raised at Bomas of Kenya cannot be amended through a parliamentary initiative because they are touching on two things. You change structure of government. The current structure of government, we have a parliamentary system. We want to change to a presidential system where ministers, cabinet ministers will come from parliament, where a prime minister will sit in parliament. If you change to that system, is changing the system of government. System of government, you must go for a referendum. That's, you must use Article 257. And Article 257, you have to collect 1 million signatures. The signatures must be verified by IEBC. Then IEBC now, when it's certified that these signatures are authentic, then you can call for a referendum.
But in the wake, sorry to cut you short, but in the wake of the outbreak of COVID-19, Mheshimiwa, is that practical? Is that something we can do?
It's not practical. It will depend on the advice from the expert. The Minister of Health has expertise. The way it has advised Parliament on the seating arrangement, the way it's going to advise the Minister of Education on the issue of social distancing and when they are reopening the school, the Ministry of Education will give an expertise advice on whether we open up the country for the popular initiative or we delay the exercise furthermore. But I'm sure with the ongoing reforms in the Ministry of Health and advisories on how to go about the COVID-19, we'll be able to manage maybe this year or next year once things settle down.
All right. The Ministry of Health, I believe that is what you meant, not the Ministry of Education.
Health, yeah.
But then, you know, are we really genuine about the things that we want as a country? Because I remember in 2009, after the post-election violence, there was a committee of experts that was appointed, and their agenda was, you know, just to bring the nation together, sort of what the BBI is pursuing at this particular time. What failed, and are we really genuine about these things that we want as a country? I'll start with you, Mheshimiwa, then get another response from Steve.
When we are actually campaigning for change of the Constitution, and after the Constitution was promulgated, there were two different opinions, that 80% of the content of the Constitution 2010 was okay. But 80% was okay, 20% was not okay. But we have realized finally that the Constitution has marginalized so many communities. So many communities don't feel that they're in the government because there are only two topmost positions, the presidency and the deputy. If the two communities are access to those two positions, what of the rest of the country? The other thing is that the margin between the winner and the loser are very close. President Uhuru Jubilee won with about 6-point-something million votes. Raila won with about 6-point-something, Ghana 6-point-something votes. So the margin was too small. How do you leave out a section of Kenyan that voted for NASA and you only accept a section of Kenyan that voted for Jubilee to run the country affairs? We need a unifying factor. And the unifying factor is the Constitution. We have to accommodate the opposition. We have to create the office of the official opposition in Parliament. We have to create the office of the Prime Minister so that another community can ascend to that slot. You cannot just leave a country divided after election. And mark you, we are accommodating the new Constitution. The BBI is accommodating some of the views that were provided by Kriegler Commission after the post-election violence. They are being accommodated in the current Constitution amendment.
So what will be the essence of having an election when there is no clear winner, and I don't want to use the other term?
That's
we
why,
have to accommodate everyone
that's why we are saying,
who participated in the competition.
That's why we are saying the winner shall not take it all. So that you unify a country, you don't leave a country divided. We are winners, so we take it all. No. We are losers, so that we remain, we remain languishing politically for the next 5 years before we go to another election. No, we will be dividing the country. Look at the Malawi style. When the court nullified the election of the sitting president, they went back to an election. Their constitution is very clear. You win 51 plus, you get the majority. But after the election, you can accommodate the losers in the cabinet. Tell them, bro, give us some names. You include you in the cabinet. But now the current Kenyan constitution, the winner takes it all. Like the current situation, we have a NASA coalition and a Jubilee party. If today ODM or ANC or Wiper formed a post-election coalition with Jubilee, automatically the members of ANC or ODM or ODM, ANC or Wiper will lose automatically their seats in the opposition, because the constitution envisaged that we'll have the majority side and the minority side. ODM has majority leader Mbadi. If today ODM quits the NASA coalition and joins the Jubilee side, they form a post-election coalition, Mbadi will have to lose his seat as minority leader. UNET will have to lose his seat as the whip. That's what we're saying. We need a constitution that accommodates also the losers without necessarily losing their rights as opposition in parliament. We'll have an official opposition in parliament. we'll have the government side. We'll have the cabinet secretary sitting in parliament, and therefore reducing even the cost of expenditure running the government. Because now, the constitution envisages that a cabinet secretary shall not sit in parliament. At the county level, we have CECs who are not members of the county assembly. So if today Savula, who is representing the people of Lugari, wants an answer from the cabinet secretary, or let's say the government, cabinet secretary for health, regarding issues on COVID-19, I'll have to ask the question in parliament. The question will be deferred to a committee, a departmental committee, chaired by my fellow MP, who has nothing to do with the ministry, running of the ministry. Then he will go and seek answers from the minister, the cabinet secretary. Then he will bring the answers to parliament. That is through a third party.
But I believe, Mheshimiwa, the reason why that was introduced was to separate politics from service delivery. You know, the
that's what I'm saying.
are sort of technocrats.
That's what I'm saying. It's not working.
politicians.
It's not working. You can get a technocrat who is a politician.
In this country, the way we understand our politics, Mheshimiwa,
no.
Things are done, really.
You can get a security expert.
We know our politics. Yes, there is the ideal, and we know our reality.
All politicians.
Can we separate these two?
All politicians are technocrats in their own right. I'm a PhD holder in communication. I've been a journalist. I've been a news editor.
That we do not dispute.
So there is a doctor in parliament, Dr. Nyikal. Every area we have an expert. And in fact, when you are selecting the chairman of the committees, we look at their CV. But even when you are allocating seats, who sits in which committee?
But won't it get to a point where politics will override? You know, a CS for the current system that has been there is sort of like, you know, let's have somebody who has that national face. In a ministry, you represent like the whole nation. You're not attached to a particular constituency or a particular county. But assuming you have a member of parliament from a particular constituency as a CS in a particular ministry, how then will we solve the problem of differentiating him from where he's coming from, even in terms of his mandate in delivering for the nation, and just giving him this nationwide face, for lack of a better term?
You know, the same constitution says sovereignty belongs to the people. The people can do it directly or can go through their representative. The representative of the people who have the sovereign authority are the elected leaders. They're not those cabinet secretaries. Those are appointees of the president. They are not in touch with what's happening at the grassroots level. Common Mwananchi. If you ask Matiang'i what is happening in Lumakanda police station in my village, he's not aware. But if you put there an elected leader, he will go across the country and understands what is happening. But Michuki was an elected leader. Michuki knew what was happening with security operation in terms of Mungiki affairs. He managed to crash Mungiki affair because he knew how the common Mwananchi is feeling. But these cabinet secretaries are sitting on top of flats in Nairobi here, on the grassroots. They are nowhere. They are not felt.
Don't we have systems that provide a way of the CS working with the leaders at the local level? I believe that is there.
I'll give you an example.
The failure is not the system, it's how we are taking advantage of the system.
I'll give you a perfect example, like the Minister of Health. And I don't think you know this. The Ministry of Health is hanging up there. In between the Ministry of Health and coordinators at regional level, we don't have a representative of the Ministry of Health. You will leave Ministry of Health, you go direct to a county government. There is no, like the way in the provincial administration, there is a regional coordinator in charge of that region. At security level, there's a regional coordinator, regional commander of police at that region. The health department, we don't have a regional coordinator at regional level. And this is a very critical ministry. That's why we have to amend the constitution to include those other issues.
I know we can continue exploring this on and on, but Steve Mogaka, kindly also come into the conversation. And let me take you back a bit, even something that Mheshimiwa mentioned earlier, the proposal to increase and have some sort of an expansion in the slots in leadership so that we can achieve inclusivity. Some have really criticized this proposal, and they say it could have a very negative effects on the taxpayer, because it means then that the budget has to be increased when it comes to increasing their positions. What do you think? Is this the best way to solve the issue of leadership in our country?
Thank you. Great concerns by our citizenry, but there is no doubt that we have had serious disruptions in government whenever there is an election, even after we have done our 2010 constitution. During Kibaki's time, we had disruptions. During President Uhuru's time, we've had disruptions. And therefore, the question as to inclusivity is really a moot question, because everybody knows that unless there is inclusivity, we are going to have disruption. So the question on whether or not we are going to have too heavy an executive or too heavy a leadership is really neither here and there, or not there, because the cost of good governance, the cost of inclusivity has got to be borne by the taxpayers. Yeah, but as we go deeper into this, I do remember that one of the gains we got in the 2010 constitution is separation of the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Yeah, and when I hear Honorable Savuli wanting MPs to be cabinet members, then we will be regressing on that separation of the executive from the legislature. Because when do you become a minister and when do you become a legislator? Yeah? Because we have given Parliament lots of powers to summon the executive, the CSS, and everybody else to come and account to them. And therefore, as much as we are saying, yes, we need these reforms, we still need this clear distinction between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Because the problem we have now in the judiciary is that the executive wants to play a part in the appointment of members of the judiciary. And you can see the stalemate that we are in. And I trust Honorable Savuli and his colleagues should rise up to the occasion and call and summon the Attorney General of the Republic, because the Attorney General has been given slots to sit in the Judicial Service Commission to sort out executive matters there. So we shouldn't have a country come to a standstill because of this, and therefore I will not be one of those who will be drumming for the legislature also combining as part of the executive and answering for the deeds and misdeeds of the executive. That distinction is very clear. Because remember, when in politics and you are a minister, then there is also the temptation to align resources towards the area you originate from. And therefore, it will then also become a challenge for the legislature to deal with their own when they are holding cabinet portfolio. So as much as we are moving in to create reforms in governance, I think let us be slow from being ambitious to say that the legislature wants to claw back their cabinet positions, just like the executive wants to claw back their power to say who will be judge, who will not, who will be minister, who will be not. And with tremendous respect to our parliamentarians, they are the ones who vet the people who hold CS positions in this country. So if we have poor representation or poor performance on the part of the cabinet secretaries, then I think the buck stops in Parliament, because it is them we have given the role of oversight and to crack the whip and even to censor these people so that the president can have an opportunity to fire them.
Mheshimiwa Savula, what do you say about that? That it's you guys who have the power to actually pass whoever becomes our CS at the end of the day. So if there's poor performance, then the responsibility should trickle down. What's your response to that? And also tell me about, some people who still complain that members of parliament, some of them neglect their constituencies. Some just exist in Nairobi and never go back to handle the issues on the ground. So assuming such a person is entrusted with a position of a cabinet secretary, won't we be doubling that particular problem? Won't that be counterproductive?
First of all, the issue of cabinet secretaries. The Constitution stipulates clearly when you are vetting a cabinet secretary, you deal with suitability, the integrity issues. You don't deal with performance. You don't know how he's going to perform thereafter. So performance, thereafter MPs are supposed to follow up on the issue of performance. Secondly, I would like to talk about the budget. We are not expanding or we are not increasing the expenditure by creating a new constitution and including these other new positions. The only two new positions will be, the three new positions will be the Prime Minister and two deputies, which is not main costly to the country. We have Achieng, who is holding the position of the Prime Minister, but unofficial. That is actually the Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya because he's coordinating, his function is coordinating all the ministries. The coordinating functions are the functions that we have put in the Constitution as the functions of a Prime Minister. It's still the same thing. So we are not increasing on the budget, on the expenditure on the executive. We are actually reducing the budget of the executive. A cabinet secretary earns 1.5 million a month. An MP plus his package is also almost 1.2 million. An MP, when he's made a cabinet secretary, will only have one MP and one cabinet secretary. So we'll have eliminated one more because we'll have all these cabinet secretaries eliminated and an MP will take over that function. So there will be no duplication that we have an MP and we have a cabinet secretary. We have an MP who is the same as a cabinet secretary. So we are reducing on the budget. At the county level, we are also reducing on the expenditure of the executive because we will eliminate CECs at the county secretary. And the CECs will be the MCAs. We'll appoint MCAs who are qualified expenditure on the government. That's what we are doing. And if an MCA, we in the Constitution also, we want to increase the level of education. Minimum qualification for you to become an MCA, you must have a diploma. Minimum entry point for you to become an MP must be a degree, simple degree. Because current situation where we fail to oversight the ministers effectively is because of maybe the education barrier. You don't understand the function of a cabinet. There are so many MPs who don't have degrees in parliament. We want to eliminate that because that is one of the barriers that make MPs not effectively oversight the cabinet secretaries. Because they don't know the function of a cabinet secretary. Some don't understand. They just vote by shouting in parliament. Some have never even participated in the law-making process in parliament. Some have not even spoken in parliament, even made a speech. So we increase the level of the quality of representation. For an MP to hold that position, must have a minimum qualification of a cabinet secretary, of a minimum qualification of a degree. Then the other issue you have spoken about, we were talking about after every election, post-election violence, a complaint here and there, we land in the Supreme Court, a country remains divided. The constitution we are making, we are using the Bomas of Kenya draft. We as ANC, we have already presented our recommendation to the Haji Commission. And our recommendation are based on the Bomas of Kenya draft. That the winner should not take it all. The Prime Minister and the President have to share the spoils. After elections, there should be an office of the official opposition funded by the taxpayers' money. Now we don't have an office of official opposition. We have jokes, minority leadership. If you put minority leadership body here to fight for the rights of a common mwananchi and Raila, who is more effective? Raila is more effective, but Raila has been left out because the constitution did not even envisage that we'll be having the office of the official opposition, who is not funded. So Raila is in the cold. Parliamentary function, minority leader, who steps in as the leader of official opposition. But it cannot work like that. We need the office of the official opposition leader. If the winner is President Uhuru, the runners-up is Raila, Raila and his team have to occupy a certain corner so the country remains united. You don't dump them like that. The constitution has dumped them. They're just in the cold. Right. They're in the streets.
As talks are there, and they are very right to change this particular constitution. Right now, it's not about whether we need to change it. Of course, there's so many people who've spoken about it and given reasons why, the 2010 constitution ought to be reworked. As as we bring this conversation to a close, gentlemen, I want you to tell me what you feel should be the fundamental issues that, in case we have a change in the Constitution, we change the 2010 Constitution, these are the issues we should not forget so that we do not get back to this point a few years after now. What are the issues that should shape the conversations revolving around the change of this Constitution so that the document that we will come up with will serve the purpose that we are all seeking? I want to start with you, Steve, and then finalize with Mheshimiwa.
Thank you. Those thoughts, I guess, are water under the bridge because all thinking, submissions, and representations have already been made through the committee of BBI. But not holding brief for anybody, let us first agree as a nation, even before we convert the recommendations of this committee into a bill that will go to Parliament. Let us agree that even when we amend this constitution, as Kenyans, particularly those of us who participate in seeking leadership, we must be prepared to accept the results of or the outcome of the election. And arising out of that, let us have a credible electoral commission that conducts elections according to the Constitution, very transparently, so that the winner knows and everybody knows they won. Those who have not won should be able to be satisfied that they have been beaten in a clear and fair election. Then again, going forward, we want to see a very serious and vibrant Parliament because all these failings are because our constitutional arms are not, doing their thing. We want to see a very strong Parliament that protects, the citizens of this country. We want to see a very strong and independent judiciary, that stands up and checks the other arms of government as it protects Kenyans. And I want to see a Kenya where everybody is given opportunity, because inclusivity, as Mheshimiwa said here, is everything. When anybody finds that they are marginalized or they are shortchanged, then you know that is a recipe for chaos. And then all I'm asking for again is that let us as Kenyans, put our country ahead of everything and know that what we do should not be about self, but about this country.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that. Mheshimiwa?
First, I'll talk about inclusivity, that all communities, we have more than 42 tribes living in Kenya, must feel that they are comfortable in their country. Second, cohesiveness of a country. After every election, let's have a strong government that has representation all over the country, not a particular region taking over everything. Thirdly, we have to strengthen the opposition and make it part of the funding from government. We have to have a strong office of the leader of the opposition to have strong checks and balances against the government. This will curb the spread of corruption in the government. But when we have a weaker opposition link, a missing link, then the fight against corruption will not succeed. So this constitution has to deal with that. You cannot fight against corruption without having linkages or those positions in the Constitution. They must be in the Constitution so that they can get funding from the Constitution to ensure that we fight against corruption. As I talk about corruption, we have to strengthen, and these are recommendations, the ethics and corruption as it is, as an independent institution. The Office of the Director of Public Prosecution as a strong and independent institution, well-funded. In this constitution, we are also recommended that we separate the general duties of the police and the DCI. We have to create DCI as an independent institution from the General Police Service Commission. It has to be on its own for it to effectively deal with the fight against corruption.
All right.
Then thirdly, we have to strengthen devolution. We have to ensure that we increase the devolution share, revenue share from 15 to 35%. These are the issues that are contained in the BBI report.
All right.
And so if we effectively deal with this matter, we will have settled and ensured that Kenya has stabilized in terms of peace and in terms of economic development.
All right, thank you so much for that. So will these issues still be contained in the final document that will be presented by the task force as we await them to do that? They said and affirmed yesterday that they have concluded their mandate and they are ready to advise the government on the way forward when it comes to the implementation process. We are seeking to we are staying on top of this particular matter for you. We'll be having conversations and also helping you understand all the angles that come with it. Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa Ayub Savula, Member of Parliament, Lugari constituency.
Thank you.
And Steve Mogaka, political analyst. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for creating time for us. Now we want to take a very short break. We'll be coming back and crossing over to the second part of the program. We are talking about the preparations for reopening of religious institutions. I'll be having religious leaders, Bishop Elizabeth Thuya, founder House of Clergy Association, and Bishop James Murunga, member of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. We will be looking at some of the issues that should shape the safety of those who go to the places of worship when we reopen these places of worship in a bit. We take that break now. Thank you so much for staying with us. We are now on to the second part of our show today. We are talking about the preparations for the reopening of churches. Right now, there's a committee that is chaired by Catholic Archbishop Anthony Muheria that are just reviewing this reopening process and will advise the government on the best approach when it comes to the implementation. Now, we want to ask you to be part of this particular conversation, and the question we are asking this morning on our our viewpoint question is, should the government reopen places of worship and schools? Should the government reopen places of worship and schools? That is our viewpoint question. Should the government reopen places of worship and schools? Interact with us on social media at KBC Channel 1 and at Serfine_Achieng on Twitter, Serfine Achieng on Facebook. We'll share some of your thoughts in the course of this particular program. I'm hosting, yes, that's the question we're asking you this morning. Should the government reopen schools and places of worship? Should the government reopen schools and places of worship? That is what we are asking you this particular morning, so that you can be part of the conversation that we want to have in studio with Bishop Elizabeth Thuya, founder, House of Clergy Association. Thank you so much for creating time for us, Bishop. And also I'm hosting this morning Bishop James Murunga. He's a member of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. He also chairs the Leadership and Governance Commission at the EAK. Thank you so much, Bishop, for creating time for us this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we begin straight away with, I know it has affected you individually as a religious leader and other churches as well, and most, just generally places of worship in the country. I'm talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. I want us to start there, and I'll begin with you, Bishop James. How much of an impact has this pandemic had, especially from your side, and generally when you look at the places of worship and how worship was conducted before COVID-19, what are your thoughts?
Well, thank you so much. Indeed, this COVID-19 has had major impact and effect on places of worship. From where I stand as a clergy, the usual culture of the Christian family is the assembling together for worship, for prayer, for fellowship. There's so much encouragement that people get from just interacting and fellowshipping together. And then when the suddenlies happened and suddenly we are not able to assemble, there's been a lot of negative impact in the context that the spiritual state of the population is wanting. because people draw nourishment from coming together, praying together, listening to the Word of God. So as a result, there are various social trends that begin to go down the hill, where you find the hopelessness, the traumatic conditions of people because of the state of the, no assemblies or coming together. So from my place of view, that's part of really what I see as part of the negative effect that has impacted on the church and the population. Thank you.
Bishop Elizabeth, from your perspective, what would you say in terms of the impact COVID-19, I beg your pardon, has had on places of worship?
In fact, on behalf of the clergy that I represent and House of Clergy Association umbrella, and as the national chairman, it has really hit us hard because this is not the normalcy that we used to have. Even if we were told directly to get on Facebook to do our services, you realize that most of the people and most of the members, some of them even cannot afford to buy bundles to be online service. And at the same time, you find that, most of the clergy, they are in rural areas whereby they don't even have phones that even they can do their services online. So, and with the normalcy that we've had, including the elderly people, they are missing the part of even going to worship. Most of them, they don't have phones where they can be able to listen to us on Facebook or online. So I would say that COVID-19 has really hit the Pentecostal church or in charismatic churches, or in wide, all churches together. And it has really affected us big, and we can't wait for the churches to open officially, so that everybody can be included to go to worship God and fellowship with God. There is that communion when people gather together. It's not the same way like even doing online service. So to me, I would say that for sure it has had a big impact on us in areas of bringing people together to worship the Lord, to fellowship together. And many of the clergy that I represent, they are really affected in this area of even doing online service. Even when we were told to bring on board 15 people, still it couldn't really help per se. So it has been quite a big challenge.
Did we ever imagine that we can find ourselves in this particular space, that churches would actually one day be closed?
Nobody who thought, nobody who planned about it, we never even dreamt about it. Some of us, we are prophets. We never foresaw such. But at the same time, it has helped us and most even of the clergy to get to understand that God works with season and timing. So we've, at the same time now, gotten to awake. It's a wake-up call at the same time. Even if it has the bad effect of it, it's a wake-up call for us to, at the same time, embrace the technology, like other countries, how they are. Because you find in US and the rest of the countries, they have embraced technology and they will do their service live. So at the same time, we've embraced technology. And now even our people, at the same time, they are also embracing technology.
Yeah, so we are trying to adjust.
We are trying to adjust with the new norm.
Bishop James, I want us to look at, compare the experience, the experience of going to church as a community, as a family, and worshiping there, and the experience of having your home church, and the experience of following up a service online. What would you say in terms of comparison, and what are some of the challenges that people have been sharing with you with regards to how they are catching up with this new normal?
Two paradigms. One is just the reality where we have been used to the Christian tradition, where we traditionally, particularly for Kenya, where there is freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of worship. So there's been a trend that we are used to assembling together, and we have generally hit the comfort zone in regards to our assembling together. But then when you look at global realities in terms of the fact that there are some nations where such assemblies are not even permitted, when you look at the scripture, which is the foundation of our Christian faith, where the prophetic writings indicate that there would be a time such as this. So, in regards to comfort zone and traditions, yes, it could be a setback and it is a challenge. But in terms of global realities, but hinged on the principle and foundation of the Word of God, again, we are not startled by what is happening. And this is a point of learning for us as Christians, that as much as we rejoice in the assembling together in traditional places of worship, but for a long time I think we had also abandoned some, not all, but some had abandoned the family altar. This has been a good time to really reflect, stop the busy schedules that we all have, and reflect and pray and sit with your family. And suddenly you find even your workman at home or a house help now also contributing to the sharing of the Word of God, breaking away from the tradition that you have to be in charge for the bishop, the pastor to share the Word. Now, even some, our own children and house helps and the family unit is being brought back together. It's a learning curve, and we must face this reality that even when things open up, we should not abandon the beauty of the family setting and worship and the expression of our praise to God. Yeah.
Let's talk about the financial implications. We cannot run away from that, subject, Bishop. Has COVID also brought some negative financial implications in how places of worship are run?
Yes, indeed. Just like any other institution, the church is an institution, and it carries a missional purpose. And that missional purpose deals with the spiritual and spiritual welfare of the people, as well as the social welfare of the people. And to a large extent, an economic aspect, because there are many, including the clergy and their employees that serve within the church context, that begin to be faced with the realities of the COVID-19 in the context that the cash flow within the church settings, for some, it dwindles. But we are thankful that there is always a remnant that have always continued to be faithful in giving their tithes and offerings, and it supports the missional purpose of the church. So when we talk about the economics, of course, in social media and at times on the media channels, we see people pointing, accusing fingers to clergy, feeling like maybe we want the churches back running and congregating because of the tithes and offerings. Yes, it's a reality. The tithes and offerings contribute towards financing the missional agenda of the church. And we are not shy about that. And it's been affected. There are pastors whose families are affected and their leaders. And of course, a workman is worthy of his wages. So when they serve, they do not serve expecting that manna will fall from heaven. It is the contributions of the members that support the welfare of the leaders and those that serve.
All right, Bishop Elizabeth, I want you to also add your voice on that. This money issue, there's always been a suspicion around it. Also talk to us about, how that has been impacted.
I would add to this, church is a government by itself. And I want to correct this error that people have been saying that the clergy want the church to be open because of the tithes and offering. It's an error, because every institution, because church is an institution, and we are called by God and appointed by God. Some of us, we are entrepreneurs, including me. There's no day I've ever relied on tithes and offering. If somebody gives, they give cheerfully according to the word of God, so that the principles that are bound with actually obeying the word of God, they work in your life. The same thing, the government of Kenya is affected right now because of the economic or global crisis, because of COVID-19, and we pay the VAT 16% or 14%. The same way the church organization is led by what people give. We have workers who are working in the church. We have ministers who are, they are full ministers. They do it actually on daily basis. That is what people go. They go to church and they are counseled by their pastors. Not like us who actually, we are entrepreneurs, and at the same time we have the calling of God upon our life. And I want Kenya to understand this and to correct this error, because it's been like something to blaspheme the church when they say that we are really asking for the church to be opened so that we can go back and get the tithes and offering. That should not be the criteria that should be looked onto in spite of the COVID-19, because at the same time, even government are opening the business presses so that they can also be able to correct the VAT, so that they can be able to learn the government to pay the people who are working in government, to pay the members of parliament. We are not pushing. We are pushing for the church to be open so that we can go back and worship our God like we've been worshiping him. Church is a fellowship. Church is somewhere where people come to get encouraged, to come and be counseled. There's so many people right now who are going through depression as we speak. They can't be able to go to the church to get that comfort or to get that counseling, to be prayed for. Well, COVID-19 has taught us a lot. And regarding even praying for ourselves, I was telling people, if there's a time I've created time to fellowship with God and pray and even fast, it's this timing, because at least I wasn't that very busy. I created more time. This COVID-19, at the same time, I've been telling people it's part of revival at the same time, because it's brought the families together. It's brought I'm telling people it's going back to the Garden of Eden, where God created man and woman, and apart from that, the Word of God tells us that the serpent came and brought people out of the Garden of Eden, and Jesus Christ has brought us back to the Garden of Eden. God wants us to, the family altars, the man of God have said, we commune back with our children, because somehow even those people who are married had gone away from the family values. You understand? So, but what I'm trying to say is this. I want to say that our church opening, as we are advocating for it to be opened, is the same way the business people have been advocating the business to be opened. The same way we are advocating for the schools to be open. Right. So it should not be looked onto like the church, there is an agenda, like we want the church to be open so that we can get offerings and tithes, and they can look at it and say, in spite that it has affected most of the clergy, God has supplied our needs according to the riches of glory.
All right.
Yes.
So we saw what happened just recently. Yes. There is that process of church reopening. Yes. Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i and the CS in the Ministry of Health, Mutahi Kagwe, jointly appointed an interreligious council that is chaired by the Catholic Archbishop Anthony Muheria, and they were sort of to review the reopening of churches and how safely to do that. Bishop James, if you're privy to what is happening in terms of the processes and the stages, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Could this be soon?
Yes.
What are you hearing as the clergy?
Yes, I believe that there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is hope because we've had, for us within the umbrella networks, and I'm part of the KCMF, Kenya Church Ministers Forum, which brought together several umbrella bodies, and we've been praying and interrogating what's going on. I think the greatest mishap that happened at the very beginning, the church was left out in terms of the consultations and mapping out the direction. But we thank God through a consultative process, the head of state, our president, opened the door for the different cabinet ministers to be able to come and engage the clergy. So I cannot speak for the Interreligious Council because I'm not part of that of the team, but just what I'm seeing is that there is consultation. We've had meetings where they are catching our views and we are having our input. And all of this is healthy because it begins to establish a perspective that it's not life as usual. Even when places of worship are considered for reopening, it's not going to be life as usual. Of course, even within the church fraternity, we have our own faith extremists who run with faith and abandon reality and wisdom. So I believe this process is helping to bring us together in that paradigm of faith and wisdom and practical realities in face of the risks that COVID-19 presents to us. There is hope, there is a future for us. Yeah, thank you.
So light at the end of the tunnel. There is hope. That is what you see. So
exactly.
We should expect something positive at the end of this whole process. But then, what should we expect as the new normal, Bishop Elizabeth, when churches finally reopen? What are some of the things that we should anticipate that probably were not there before, we've never even thought about, that will become part of our culture as we go to these places of worship?
Regarding that, there's, even with the guidelines that they have shared with us, just a bit of it with the interfaith that was actually erected to look around and see how the churches can be opened. There's a lot that is going to change, and we are praying that for sure it won't be that strict to us, because I understand you cannot. We have that normalcy of praying and putting hands on people. We have that normalcy that cannot change per se of Holy Communion. We have that fellowshipping together. The Word of God tells us that you do kiss good, with a holy kiss. You know, that embracing each other and hugging each other. There's a lot that will change.
Will all that change?
Somehow, we as I've told the clergy, this one has affected not only the clergy, it has affected all areas, including business, including hotels. You would sit near to your friend, you would love even to embrace each other, but it's affected us widely. But for now, so that we don't really get derailed, because I tend to believe, because like now the business were given actually guidelines to follow. Hotels were given guidelines to follow. I'm urging the clergy from wherever you're watching me from, because for us not to really delay this whole process. We have the guidelines that were released before, and we have the guidelines that we were waiting for the interfaith to also release to us, and all what we are asking the government of Kenya. Even the clergy, we are capable of following the guidelines, and they should not derail us anymore. Church is important. Church is the one that prays for all of us, and we are ready to comply, to follow the guidelines. If they tell us to use the thermometer, we are ready to do that. If they tell us to put the distance, we are ready for that. If they tell us to do the fumigation for the churches, they had given us these guidelines before, we are ready to follow that. Only what we are asking is they don't really restrict us per se, but we are ready to follow as the business, the way it has been opened, so that they don't derail us anymore, so that we go back to our churches. Even if we're going to do 2 services, those who are big churches, we are ready to comply with the guidelines that are going to be given. But now the in thing is we need the church to be opened.
Even as they are opened, Bishop James, what would you anticipate from your end in terms of probably this culture that we are going to have to embrace going forward, for the church to be compliant with the directives that have been issued by the Ministry of Health? What is it that we will miss? Something that we are used to that we may never see, or we will see after a very long time when COVID is over?
Yeah, just to, I think, build upon what my sister Bishop has addressed, in the fact that the warmth of fellowship, and the warmth of fellowship has provided many, many benefits to all of us over the years. In some churches, they share a meal together after the service. And like she said, communion, there is the shaking of hands, and, you know, all of that has been the church tradition, which has been very beautiful. And these are the realities that we must face in the new normal in terms of caution, because COVID-19 is not just about Kenya, it's about the globe. You know, you're not sure. I remember when it just began, I was out of the country early March, and then this began to happen, and I had to cancel my trip. So on the flight, I was wondering, what do I touch? What should I not touch? Those are the realities. And hygiene issues, of course, we now have to be careful. We have to follow the protocols. And the beauty that I can also really thank and appreciate the president and the government is that they have not just dumped a set of rules upon the clergy and the churches. They have set up the Interreligious Council, and they are developing some set of rules and protocols based on the health requirements. So we really thank the Lord that, and we bless our leaders for that consideration, that we can be able to develop and begin to regulate ourselves, even in terms of these simple protocols that exist. Thank you.
All right. I wish we had more time. We could go on and on having this very important conversation, but in the interest of time, just allow me give you a chance to, in 20 seconds, just give me your final thoughts. I will begin with you, Bishop James, then come to Bishop Elizabeth.
Just a message of encouragement. COVID-19 season has provided a moment for us to stop, to reflect, check on your relationship with God, check on your relationship with your family, check on your relationship with one another, and be your brother's keeper, be your sister's keeper. Let not your neighbor go hungry as you wish to go back to a church building. Begin to be the church alive and active in every space that you occupy. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Bishop, for that. And now it's over to you, Bishop Elizabeth, and also tell me what you think would be the role of the church in, you know, helping eradicate COVID-19. In this process, what can the church do also?
Our greatest weapon is prayer. We believe in God, and our hope is in God. And we trust in God, and we continued praying and fasting and believing God that COVID-19, it is seasonal, and it is not going to live with us forever. It's going to vanish in the name of Jesus. And I would encourage whoever who is watching me from wherever you're watching me from, that let's keep on holding on our faith and looking unto Jesus, who is our author and our finisher in our faith. And the other thing I would love to ask and kindly request that our governments, knowing that for sure, even when we were in skirmishes, even when we've been in mess, they normally actually learn to church for help. I'm asking them once again, the way they have actually opened the rest of the places in business and the rest places, that they quicken and hasten to open the church, because it's a praise of rescue. It's a praise where people who are mourning, those who are desperate, those who are hopeless, they learn onto. And it's my request that actually they're going to hasten the process and open the churches so that we can go back to worship the Lord the way we've been used to. And the rest is, all I can ask is, let's keep praying and trusting God in everything. And as the word of God says, what God can do, no man can do. And what is impossible to men is possible to God. So this is just for a season. COVID-19 will be over, and we will embrace our fellowshipping together. We'll embrace our normalcy together in Jesus' mighty name.
Thank you so much. This too shall pass.
Yes, it shall
Bishop
come to pass.
Elizabeth Thuya,
Yes.
the National Chair, House of Clergy Association, Bishop James Murunga, member of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. Thank you so much for creating time for us this particular morning. What a way to end the show. We also appreciate our viewers for being part of this. My name is Serfine Achieng Oma, and our sign language interpreter has been Lense Odingo. We are now paving way for the Swahili version of the program, Tamrini, coming up with Nancy Okware. Do stay for that. Thank you.
Thank you too.